I'm Martha Higdon from quiltingbymartha.com. Today's tutorial is I'm going to show you how easy it is to put a border on your quilt. As you can see, this quilt top here is finished, but you can tell it needs something else. It needs that border to bring it all together. So I have it up on my design wall, if you're that fortunate to have a design wall. And then what you want to do is you want to take a tape measure. This is my favorite tool, and then you're going to measure the center of the quilt. And I measure 56. So my measurement is 56. So then what I want to do is I want to cut my two pieces, because at this time I'm going to put my top and bottom border on, which is 56 across. So then I'm going to take my fabric and measure to 56 and cut it off. So I'm cutting both at the same time because my top and bottom will be the same. Measuring from my middle because my top may have stretched a little bit in the piecing. So after I measure it and I've marked the center of the top of the quilt with a pen, I then move over here to my other table where I've already cut a top and bottom at 56. And then, because there's piecing on the back of this, I want to make sure I see where the piecing is, and there's no piecing on my border, so the border is going to be on the downside, right sides together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the middle of my quilt top and the middle of my 56-inch border piece. So I put the two together and then I'm going to pin them so that I know I have two centers together, the two center pieces of the quilt top and the border. And I pin that. And what this is going to do is measuring by the center and making sure the border fits is so that we don't have a wavy border, and so the quilt will lay flat. And that's our ultimate goal in any quilt, to have it lay flat. And you can pin as many times as you want through there. What we're trying to do is making sure the end comes to the end and the middle is already pinned, and we're just pinning throughout so this will lay flat. Same thing on the other side. Going to pin the edge, and sometimes there might be a little bit in there and you're just going to have to work it in because we want it to be the same size as the center measurement for our top and bottom border. Alright, so after I have the top pinned, the top border pinned on, I'm going to move over to the sewing machine, taking my pins with me. And then I'm going to sew, and as I sew down, I'm going to take the pins out as I go down. I'm just using plain white thread, regular sewing machine. I do use my 1/4-inch foot. I do like that. And then I am just going to sew all the way down the edge, starting at the corner. And this way I have my seams up so that if I had any points, I wouldn't be going over them. And since there's no anything on the border, it's on the bottom side, making sure right sides are facing together. And you're just going to go straight down the side of the border. Taking your pins out as you go. It's nice and easy, nice and straight, staying together. After I finish this, we can come back and finish the other border. Alright, you go to the very end. As you can see, I got maybe just a hair, not much, on the edge, but it all fits. And then I'm going to come over to the iron. Remember, we are not going to iron, we are going to press, because if you iron, it distorts. So we are going to be pressing towards the border, so I'm going to press the seam. By pressing the seam, it just locks the seam in. Okay, and then we are going to press towards the border. So we're going to use our fingers, press it out, making sure that it's going out away from the quilt top. Okay, again, we're going to press. So we're not going to iron. We're going to press, 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 press. You're just going to press the border to the top of the quilt. Now that that's finished, now that I have my top and bottom borders on, then I have to get a measurement for the center to put the two sides on. Sometimes you're going to have to use your floor instead of your design wall. So you got to remember getting up and down. It's going to be very hard on your back and your knees, so make sure you stretch out beforehand. And it's real important that your quilt top is pressed so that you get accurate measurements. So when we put it down, we want to make sure that it's stretched out. And what we're going to do is we are going to take a measurement. Now that we have two borders on each side, we're going to take a measurement down the center, and we are going to put the two sides on. So my measurement is 81. So I have to remember 81. Now, I like to buy a little bit of extra fabric so that I don't have to piece my borders. But sometimes you're going to have to piece your borders if you don't have enough fabric. So piecing your borders, you want to do it on a diagonal. So here I have two pieces of the fabric, and I have it on the diagonal. So what I do is, I put the two together, and then I fold it over. You can see the diagonal. And then I pin it, and then I just put a little press so I have a crease line, or you can use a marking tool. And then you would sew that line, and then you would press it open, making sure you check it first before you cut that off. So then you would press it open so that you would have one continuous line border. That's if you want to piece. If you don't want to piece, then you buy a little bit of the extra fabric, making sure that you do straight cuts because you don't want a wavy border, so you don't want to have a wavy cut. So then my measurement was 81, and I always say measure twice before you cut once. So I will re-measure. Again, going through the center from the bottom, and my measurement is 81. So then I'm going to take my piece of the two pieces I've cut, they're together, and I'm going to go over to my cutting board, and I'm going to measure out 81. And then I'm going to cut 81, and now I have my two sides. And then I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I'm going to find the middle of my piece of border, and I'm going to find the middle of my quilt, and I'm going to pin. And then since the piece is on the other side, I may move this up to my board so that I am not bending over as much. So I'm going to find the center first. I'm going to put a little pin in there so I know where my center is. When I go to pin it to the quilt, I know that is my center because we're going to start in the center and work our way out. The less that we have to bend over, the better. You need to make sure your stuff is at your height because we're not all the same height. So my table is just a little bit above my waistline so that it's at my height. Again, I'm going to find the center of the quilt top, put the side borders on. I'm going to put a little pin there. And then I'm going to find the two centers. Remember, there's piecing on this side. So we want to pin on this side so that we can check to make sure. Again, we're going to pin from the center. We have the center pinned. Then I'll go out to my two sides, and then we're going to make that measurement fit for that border so that when we sew it on, it fits. And that's what you're going to do. You're just going to put lots of pins throughout, and you're going to sew on your border. And that's how you correctly put on a border on your quilt of taking the measurements from the center of the quilt. And then once it's sewed down, remember to press your seams and always press towards the border. And then that gives you perfect borders each time. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and look for more from quiltingbymartha.com.